Yo, Eazy.
What's up, guys? My name is Evan Duvall. This is Eazy Does It. Thank you for joining us.
All right, guys, what's up? What's going on? Everybody's headphones working?
Do I press something?
Yeah, let me see. Come here, Peppy. Let's see what we got here.
We're farmers. We don't
I didn't know there was 2 steps. So I just step on and put on.
What channel?
Boom. Is it getting weird yet? All right, guys, what's going on? How's everybody feeling tonight? Thank you so much for coming out. This is episode 24 of the Eazy Does It Podcast. We're here live on Thursday night, and this is going to be a really cool episode. I wanted to bring in some friends. I'll let them introduce themselves here shortly, but I'm really excited about this conversation and format. I think it's the perfect time to get into it, and just excited that we can, serve in the community in this way and educate about options that are available. So first off, I'll let everyone introduce themselves, and we'll go ahead and get into the conversation. Start with you, Clint.
Yeah, name's Clinton. I am a single father, 9-year-old daughter. I run a multi-species regenerative ag family farm, as well as a retreat centers for educational family events, as well as a space for families to come and reconnect with their children. I also run a couple dads groups here in the Austin area, and and when I'm not doing that, I do freelance carpentry.
Awesome.
I'm Jalene. I just want to connect to people to the local food scene here in Austin. So I have some background in engineering. I've done some wilderness survival schools. I've lived and worked on a regenerative ag farm, and now I'm in Texas, and it's post-pandemic, and so I'm just learning a lot more about the food system in general. Kind of the economics of it, the sustainability of the overall system, and trying to figure out what local communities here need and want, and just the post-COVID scene of how we can have a more local and resilient food system. So I'm passionate about educating consumers, kind of what regenerative means, because I didn't know what it meant just a couple years ago. And so I feel like I can be the bridge kind of between the farmer and the average consumer. So I'm really passionate about that education piece, and just connecting more to food and landscapes and nature.
Yeah. What's up?
You're not going to introduce yourself?
I will here shortly. You go ahead.
All right. Peppy, or Farmer Peppy. Been working in regenerative agriculture for 10 years. It takes about 6 or 7 just to keep falling on your face. But got some neat carrots coming up this year. It's looking good.
Yeah. Well, I'm Evan Duvall. This is my podcast. I'm having a really good time picking different subjects of things that are here in Austin, and no, seriously, this is a really cool one for me. Jalene, she first started serving the bone broth when I was putting out ads about, hey, we're looking for local vendors, we want to get different areas of the community involved, and she popped up, and I think I smelt it first and just followed my nose out there, and I saw Jalene, and that was the first thing I noticed, was just legitimate passion for it. She was so happy to share and tell people about regenerative farming and how she was playing a part. And that was, the first thing I started to notice about this group in particular was everyone was younger, and I was so excited to bring this in tonight and present this to y'all, because this is such a pivotal point in history where we do have to ask ourselves some tough questions about how we're moving forward. And it's really important that, we're not just consuming, and we're truly asking questions. We're trying to understand, where things come from and how we can build a better future, not just politically or socially, but, economically and regeneratively. And I'm excited to, have this dynamic where we got 3 different farmers in their own ways, their own approaches, to start talking about, hey, what's available. And I sent out that first text, and I was like, hey, guys, I want to bring a few farmers in and teach these city slickers a little something about the countryside. And it was just a joke, but honestly, it's like we got to start thinking about, not every farmer is on a huge plot of land right now. There's different concepts and ideas that are coming about of how we can do this with less land. And I think it's a really important question to ask ourselves, because Austin is in such a state of growth, that it's not just, everybody can point their finger at the growth. I mean, you look at all the skyscrapers, you look at everybody moving here. It's something that will collapse if we don't ask ourselves how. How are we growing? How can we grow better? And think about what's available to us with that infrastructure. So I like to bring in people that know better than I and ask questions. So I'd like to start with Jalene and just ask, what have you noticed about Austin? I know you spend a lot of time up in Colorado and bouncing back and forth between the two. What's unique about this place, and, what do you see on the horizon for agriculture here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like how you termed it to, like, how can we grow better? Obviously, that's like kind of a pun for growing food, but very seriously, how Austin is growing. And the biggest difference for me, especially Austin and Denver specifically, is like I got here in May, and the first thing I did really was just like not necessarily trying to find career paths or job opportunities. Was like, okay, this is how I normally like go out and shop for my food, because I had this experience in farming. So someone just mentioned, actually, I first went to a Sarana event, which is like this this retreat center out in Bastrop. And they were focused on local food, farm to table. They were having a retreat, and I just went out there, talked to them, asked them about local farmers. They connected me with Mockingbird Farm, which is where the bone broth comes from, and actually know Clint through Christy, and it just spiraled from there, of people connecting me to other people, and this really deep community mindset. And like Austin is this bubble of like, out east is like really fertile farmland, and out west is like less green but ranching community, Dripping Springs, the hill country. Out north is like dime box kind of, and like even more farming land, and then south is like Lockhart, and like it's all different, really different landscapes, but they're all within 30 to an hour away, and like tons of small farms, tons of homesteads, tons of big farms even. And I go to Denver and I try to do that same process, and it's just way harder. Like there aren't as many food producers that you can find like really easily. So that was one thing that I was like, wow, there's so much out here. But people don't necessarily know that. People aren't necessarily looking for that. So that was one of the biggest differences, is just like how much opportunity there is, how much land there is, how many people are really doing this on a big or a small scale, that just need their story told, just need that kind of, right? Like most people aren't necessarily doing what I'm doing, where I'm leaving the city of Austin and I'm going and seeking these things out. So that's where I feel like I come in to sort of try to hear their stories, hear what the farmers need, hear like how has it shifted to post-pandemic, right? Because a lot of things went online, a lot of things had to go e-commerce, and that a lot of businesses are able to shift that way, but to be honest, like that's really hard for most farmers, especially if they're like small and family scale. It's just like mom and pops, so they have struggled in that aspect, and farmers markets a lot of times shut down. Austin has amazing farmers markets. That's one thing that's great about Austin too. So there's just so much opportunity as far as like how can we grow. I think it's just like being aware that as we're coming into this urban area that is Austin, let's remember to like disperse and like go check out what's outside the city limits. You know, a lot of people come here because there's a lot of nature, there's a lot of green space, and that's great. And so we want to make sure that we're helping maintain that. And that takes like going and connecting with it and connecting with the people who are stewarding that. So I think it's really just getting curious, like, why do you want to come to Austin? What's so great, and how do we keep it that way? Who has been stewarding this area this whole time for it to remain this great thing where maybe LA or New York or wherever you're coming from isn't the way that you would like it to be? How do we keep that goodness that is why we're all coming here?
Yeah, keep it rooted.
Yeah.
Where'd you move from, Peppy? Where are you originally from?
Virginia.
Virginia? Where in Virginia?
Northern outside D.C.
Okay. Like Shenandoah? Ooh.
No, I was born off the Occoquan, but yeah, I did like 9 years of school.
That was my second guess.
Yeah, the Occoquan? No, but I did like 9 years of school in the Shenandoah Valley. That's where like between those two areas, between the Occoquan to the Shenandoah, that's where my love was created for nature. And the callback was how many people listen to it? Like, I'm sorry. All right, Mom, sorry. Yeah, no, it just came from one time smoking DMT.
Yes.
I didn't want that. I was just trying to like escape, and it backfired. I meet what I presume to be like the mother, and she tells me to move to Texas to serve her. Regenerative farming. Didn't say Austin. I just figured that would be the place that I'd be able to find space. Old shitty house in the woods right outside the city. And then yeah, cut teeth there long enough to get the job at Jester King. Woo! But I mean, they make awesome beer, and it's a heavy game to work in. It's 170 acres of shit soil. Yeah, and that's the whole point. I mean, it's just of all these conversations, I would just want to kind of like yell at y'all and hang, and everyone else can just watch, and we'll get there. But like when you're talking about the different ecosystems of Texas, Westigo's shit, and when we talk about stewards, but for the most part, I believe that there hasn't been many. I think it's a new generation. It's just land that you see that just hasn't been destroyed yet, or to the certain degree of other places where people are fleeing.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I've noticed growing up here and seeing the change, out west, especially with Dripping Springs, was, and you keep going south as well towards San Antonio, and you just take like beautiful land, not the best soil, but you take beautiful land, you shave the hills, and you build suburbs, and like that is a trend that, will not stop as more and more people move here. And Austin and Dripping will one day be completely connected. It's just it's taking minds, putting them together and saying, all right, well, the growth is happening, the people are coming, like what kind of infrastructure do we want to build on the way out there? Do people have their own gardens? Do people have these options available to them in order to at least keep a small plot of land, and that can keep people connected in a way where they start to care and they don't want to turn everything into a Dollar General or another gas station or whatever it is. And I think that's something that has to happen now. But the biggest thing that's really interesting for me is saying that this isn't just bad soil, right? Now we're learning through science on how to regenerate the soil, how to introduce or test and get nutrients back into the soil. Clint, is that anything that you've messed with as far as like how to turn the hard, rocky limestone kind of soil of Central Texas back into something that is, lush and that you would think of? I mean, when I heard they were growing hemp out in Dripping Springs and Henley and Wimberley, I was like, what's going on? Like, they're doing something out there, to the soil. So
Yeah, for sure. That's really, I mean, soil building is kind of a labor of love. Most of my experience has not been with limestone in particular, but heavy Texas black clay, stuff that is very good in a lot of ways, but it's very difficult to work with, and it's a very long process, and that speaks volumes about agriculture in general. This is a very long process. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Are you cover cropping?
What's that?
Are you cover cropping?
I am using yes, in short terms, yeah. Absolutely. It's very fun, and it's very useful, and it's also it's multi-use. But it's that is something that is a personal interest. The way you can take something that is, whether it's ignored, left to its own devices, or degraded through unintentional attack, and then kind of nurse it back to this beautiful thing that you can show to someone and go, we're not too far. But if left to the current situation, it can get too far.
Right.
And then relating that back in a very palatable way, and why that should and does matter to the general public, from a very quality of life standpoint, whether it's may not be for your quality of life, but if you've got a family, it's most definitely for them and the lineage that they'll leave, their quality of life. So and that ties very much into soil and the lineage of society. Those two things are very the parallels there are great.
Yeah, man, I think that that's where it started. Was I think that there is an issue in society right now, especially in first world countries, where there is a such thing as consumerism, and it's just people are always in a state of consumption, and there is no connection to where things come from, how things are made, and we live in a culture of depreciating value. And I think it's really important for if people aren't on their hands and knees, with their hands in the dirt, doing it themselves, at least, that they're connecting with somebody that is, and hearing these stories. And, for me, I've never gone to a farmer's market and not just been stuck for more than an hour, just to there's no running in and grabbing something like you would at the store, you can't just go get a gallon of milk or something. It's you really got to take a moment, stop, and I'm always thankful when, I can catch something like that. I think that's been the what we've been looking for in this podcast the whole time, is to say, these are members of our community. They're all contributing these various ways. I mean, we had Ryan McGrath on last. He was a hatter. It's just a different story. But he's taken the time to seek out, the beaver skins, and looking for markets and what's the best. And this is the same conversation in a different format of asking the questions that say, okay, I mean, what's more foundational than food and farming? If we're not looking there, then what's a better place to start, to really start teaching ourselves how to care about how we're living and what we're consuming, and the amount of energy that gives you back, from something as simple as sipping something delicious, instead of just what's the most available. That really gives us so much life.
Yeah, I think I just want to connect it back to your question around regenerating the soil. I think what's really important to understand in Texas specifically, so we're here in Austin, we've got a live audience, get them to participate a little bit. How many of you guys partake in mushrooms, functional or otherwise, right? Right, okay, so when we think about a mushroom, fungus in general, where does that come from? Does anybody have an answer? Say it again. Right. So like where does it come from though, right? They're involved in the decay process, right? We have mushrooms because they're breaking something else down. There's decay of plant or animal life, and that's where a mushroom comes from, right? So that, who here has like seen a mushroom growing out in the hill country? But not that many, right? Like, so normally when you're thinking about like mushrooms and fungus, it's like these lush forests of Canada or like the Pacific Northwest or the jungle. That's where that decay process is happening, just naturally, because it's green, it's moist, it's like that all year round. That's a very different environment than the hill country specifically, right? A lot of Texas outside of Austin. So the way that decay process happens in these more brittle environments is a term that you'll hear in regenerative ag, is largely with animal impact. So you can't have that decay process happening without animals in there grazing, trampling, helping that decay process of the vegetation get reincorporated into the ground. So when we think about like how did, maybe we hear that too many cows overgrazing is what causes this degeneration. We need to get rid of all the cows. That's very simple-minded. That's like not really understanding how ecosystem processes work. So it's really the way that they're managed. If we kind of think about before Manifest Destiny, before we all got to the North American plains, there were millions and millions of bison roaming the plains. We didn't have, they weren't causing climate change. There wasn't all this methane clouds like going into the atmosphere. There were way more bison than there are cattle now. So how did that happen? What's going on? It's probably something a little bit more nuanced, and that has to do with kind of the predator-prey relationship. Bison would be moving all the time because there were these predators that were chasing after them. So that's kind of what we're trying to do when we talk about regenerative ag, is get the cattle to mimic cattle and goats and sheep, like other ruminant animals. We're trying to get them to mimic this predator-prey relationship that we used to have before we domesticated everything. So that's extra important, specifically in this Texas region that's really brittle. The humidity is not distributed evenly throughout the year. We need those animals to help contribute to that decomposition cycle, to like kickstart that life-death cycle and get these microbes to start decomposing things, get those nutrients back into the soil, and create those really like alive soils. So just to like bring it back into like overarching how that's really important in this Texas region. And then number two, I think how people can think about regeneration, and specifically with this bone broth that we have here, is like the food system in general is very dispersed. We have this huge global food chain where even if you're going to the grocery store, you might be getting organic, but where was that shipped from? It was maybe shipped from California. It was maybe shipped from who knows where. And that in of itself is not very regenerative, right? The amount of links that you have, the more links that you have in the supply chain, the more emissions you're going to have from transportation, the less nutrient dense that food is going to be. So when we're thinking about how can we have a more regenerative system, sort of regardless of the soil practices, like that is one way that we need to go. But if you're buying local, it's automatically more regenerative because you have less links in the supply chain, you have less emissions, the food is more nutrient dense, that money is going straight back into your economy. So I think that's how we can start to think about regenerative in this local food scene, is like anytime you're buying local, you're creating that less dispersed supply chain, and that automatically is more regenerative. And it's really easy to do here in Austin specifically, more than other cities like Denver or elsewhere. There's just so many options, and the more people that come here, the more we are going to disperse outside of Austin, and that's where small farms come into play, and more people are wanting to become homesteaders. More people are wanting to buy land and learn how to do it. So there will be even more and more options. So I think it's just people willing to say, oh yeah, that it's possible and it's not that hard, and let me just look for that now that I know it's a possibility.
Yeah. I think it's even cool, as technology advances, how, people are taking the time to buy kits where they can grow their own spices and stuff with LED lights, above their sink. And, I think that's the next thing that I want to move into is, like, if, not everybody has the ability to, buy land or, to move away from the city because that's where they work or, that's where their lives are. Or they're just not attracted to living that type of lifestyle. But, asking ourselves, okay, well, we're aware that there is this issue. And, how can the most common person here in Austin support these systems? And other than, I'm hearing buy local, pay attention to that, even if it's at, HEB or local farmers market. Like, these things do exist here. And it's important to look for those things and support people that are taking the time because they care and want others to have access to these things. And it's not easy to drive in from, hour or 2 hours away where your farm is and come in, and especially on a Thursday night, and, to care that much and to share your time. It means the world, and I hope that translates. And people begin to see that, this is, a problem, and there is, time is ticking on it. And, but, there is things that are actionable. And, I would just like to kind of have a session of just kind of what those are, what you see, as farmers, what you notice, where people can, take part in all of this.
I mean, you definitely have your local farmers markets, but one of the problems with those is they've become very commercialized. They're very mainstream, and I understand the attraction there because you have to get eyeballs on these products. But the fact is that people come there. It's become a Saturday. This is our early morning thing to do. They're not buying the things that keep farms alive. Mm-hmm. They're going in. They're buying value-added products. Whether it be from food trucks or whether it be from farms. I mean, farms doing value-added products, that's great for them because you can take a small thing, make it into value-added, and sell it for more than you could the original thing. That's cool. But it's the stuff that is, you go and buy jewelry and things of that sort. This is not a true farmer's market. Mm-hmm. The farmer's markets need to look like a farm sitting on a table. That's what it should be. Now that falls into the farmer's hands as well. I think a big problem that we face is a lot of farmers are antisocial. And that's why they escape out to these properties. They want to farm on the land. It's what I've ran into because farming for me is as much society based as it is ecologically based. Mm-hmm. Because one doesn't matter without the other for me. And even I am met with a lot of pushback wanting to come onto farms and say, what are you doing here other than a job? What are we really selling here? And I want to get into that conversation. Even as a fellow producer, I'm met with that kind of pushback. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a responsibility on local growers to be more open as to not being so proud to not engage with your customers. If our goal in life is to provide sustenance for our communities, then let's act like it.
Sure.
Because what we're requesting is people to vote with their dollars. Mm. We're requesting that people change their way of life. We're requesting that you stop going to HEB and buy your just very easy things to grab. We're asking you to come to us. We're coming to you. We're meeting you halfway as well. Mm-hmm. But we're asking you to really make a difficult change in your daily life. And I think it's important that if we are a representative of the change that we think has to happen in the communities in the world overall, then we need to be absolutely overwhelmed in our pursuit of that. I just think we need to be doing more, honestly. And I know that farming is not easy. I mean, there's a lot of people out there doing it by themselves. But honestly, we're in a young crowd. We're in a young city. We're all on Instagram. That is, you can find anybody on Instagram. Farms, I mean, just go to different hashtags. I mean, or just look up one farmer's market, go there, talk to the farmers, circumvent the farmer's market altogether. They don't like them. They don't want to take their products there. They don't sell out. They've got to come home. They've got transportation costs. They've got fuel costs, stuff like that. But I mean, I don't know any producers that wouldn't be willing to connect you to other producers.
Yeah.
I think internet's a great resource.
Definitely. Yeah. I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me there was you saying vote with your dollars. You know, that's a choice that you're making, how you're spending your money. And then secondly, it sounds like the same thing. Like you can vote, you can vote with your attention of caring, asking those questions, saying, hey, like, can I support you? How can I support you? I think that's a beautiful way to do that, you know, to look beyond the systems and connect with individuals. And I think that is, you know, something that will inspire more and more people to step up and serve their communities in those ways. Yeah, it's a wonderful way of looking at it. How about you?
I got a lot to unpack.
Let's go, man. I'm here for it.
So you're just skating all the way back. Limestone is not soil. Dirt is not soil. Soil is soil. Soil is made through decomposition. So the whole concept of regenerative agriculture, how are you putting more back in than you are taking out? All farming is the input of organic material. You have so your OM. It's gonna be plant-based or it's gonna be animal-based. Plants take a long time. So I mean, y'all about get kicked in the nostrils in 2 weeks by the ash juniper, which makes the cedar fever. And their nodes are firing off right now. So it'll be a golden dust, dioecious species, male and female. Way too many males. Way too many males that are about to spray ya. And like that's what creates it. Just so y'all know, it is a native species. Sorry, I get wrapped out on one a bunch. It takes those needles like 2 to 3 years to decompose, and then like maybe a certain percentage actually becomes soil. For the goats I'm working on that land, it takes them 10.5 hours. So that's the scale of being a plant input versus an animal, is the speed of the rumen. As far as for the bison, there was 40 million that we believe that roamed across the nation, up to 12 miles wide. So it takes 200 goats to graze an acre intensively on a daily basis. Each animal would then produce an average of 5 pounds of drop-ins or fertilizer. So a herd of that scale, 1,000 pounds of organic material you put back in the soil every single day. If you can increase the OM of an acre by 1%, each acre will then hold 16,500 more gallons of water. So that's 200 goats. For the bison, this is 12 miles wide. This is 150,000 animals that weigh 1,800 pounds. That's what built America. That's what built our prairie. And it's all gone. The last time I checked, we have 16 years of conventional farming in America. And then I don't even think we'll even have to worry about that. Like we'll be able just to make synthetic food. We'll be able to feed the human race. What we lose is our connection to nature, connection to the humans that are actually like working it, trying to pass it on to your children, so we don't have to explain to them what birds sound like. I mean, so that's the two parts of farming. It's like, what are you taking out? What are you putting back in? And I did forget that we were talking beavers for a second. Beaver hats. Beavers rule. Like they're a magical animal that we exterminated along with the bison, the wolf, and the bee. Those were the 4 keystone species of the Americas. And yeah, we made our way in through Manifest Destiny. Like there's so much to make our way back. But the last point, being the farmer's market, You have X amount of producers that show up in these very accessible places. The most downtown one, yeah, that is for the urban seating area. You don't have to worry about that. There's other on the outside. The folks that work that hard to grow the best veg, and so far there isn't a metric that comes out that actually tests like nutrient density. So all you can do is float like certified organic, which is horseshit. There's no way as a small farm that you should have to pay $5,000 for a stamp based on like your profit margins are garbage. You're there because you're trying to serve community. You're trying to feed your people, and then this is just another step that's moved into a place of commercial, like capitalism, the whole fight of what we're trying to prevent. So then, as a people of an urban environment, if you have that space to just visit, especially if you are affluent, the money that's coming into Austin, how is it that we're not going to these places? Like, and as you said before, I mean, we're selling candles, and that's what everyone comes through. They get a candle, they get a soap, and like nothing against like candle and soap makers. But the idea is like it's just a Saturday activity as opposed to this is where I'm going to purchase my groceries. Like, America has farmers market. The international countries, like, are just not America. They just have market. Like, that's where you go. That's where the folks step into your urban density to be able to share. And then what you're up against is convenience. The convenience, go to H-E-B, and it's already there packaged, and you know how to be able to work with the certain ingredients. And scaling convenience for what's best, even for yourself, for your family. Most importantly, the ecosystems that are being created outside of your city. Like, we're just watching it get murdered off. And unfortunately, yeah, for everyone's defense, we are just all way too busy to care about it. But if we don't create a relationship with nature, we will not be moving forward as a species.
Yeah, so to just expand on some of those points, I think there's two really important ways that everyone can just start making baby steps to get more involved. Is one, that knowledge aspect. Like, go to your farmer's market and just ask questions. Start with just talking to your farmer, like, hey, like, where are you located? Do you have any events? Do you have a place that I can go that is beyond this farmer's market? That would be a way I could start purchasing from you. Getting that knowledge and that curiosity aspect is going to help us go beyond just the label, right? Like, it's great to start at H-E-B and start looking for organic, start looking for grass-fed, start looking for pasture-raised. Like, those are really great first steps. But then, as you mentioned, like, those labels aren't always helping the end farmer. It's like those links in the supply chain. Having that stamp is the USDA certified, right? Like, that money is going to the government. It's not going to that local farmer. So once you kind of learn, like, hey, what does organic mean? Well, without going too much into the details that it might be horseshit or not, like, generally it means not sprayed with pesticides, not sprayed with fertilizer. So you can ask your local farmer, hey, I don't see an organic stamp on your thing, but do you spray with pesticides or fertilizers? And they'll tell you no. Like, here are the practices that I do that are organic or are regenerative. And that's one really good way to, like, strike up the conversation with your farmer. Just, like, what practices do you do? Because really, like, where we're at is, like, there's so many regenerative practices. There's conversation right now with, like, what does regenerative even mean? Are we going to create a regenerative label? That's already starting to happen. There's goods and bads to that, but ultimately, like, you as the consumer want to feel really empowered to not have to rely on the label. You kind of want to know, like, hey, I went to this farm, I talked to the farmer, I have senses, I have smell, I have sight, I have feelings, I see how happy these pigs are. I talked to this person and they were really knowledgeable. Like, we can start to regain that trust and regain that, like, self-empowerment of, like, I know what food should feel like. I know what it smells like. I kind of know what I want to eat. And that's just a baby step, is kind of that knowledge. And then number two, that engagement. Like you said, kind of like that life force, that vitality. Like there's all of these other ways that we can start to engage with our food, engage with the land. Right, you guys are here tasting the bone broth. Like, have you ever tasted anything like that? How does it feel in your mouth? Like, what might that mean? Like, it's full of collagen. Like, you know, it's just, it kind of gives you something different. It feels different in your gut. It doesn't have all these fillers like bone broth that you buy at a store. You smell it here. It's warm. It just is really different. It's like a totally viscerally, sensationally different experience. And that just increases the more engagement you have with a farm. Like that's been my personal journey, is just like, wow, my whole, like, not only is the food more nutritious, I have this like connection with the person who I'm getting it from. I know you, I see you on a daily or weekly basis, whatever it may be. But like your senses, you're like, wow, I have these soil microbes, my hands are in the dirt, like I'm smelling the food, I'm eating it fresh. Like there's just a whole different energy associated the more and more engaged you get. And you can start doing that with, like you said, doing it on your counter, like growing the microgreens, like having a fruit tree in your front yard. Those are just the first baby steps to start to sort of get you aware that this connection with your food and with nature like brings so much more into you than just the sustenance that you're eating. It's an entire experience. And I think those are just like the baby steps, is like gaining a little bit of knowledge, gaining a little bit of that engagement. You know, Austin is a pretty health conscious community. We talk about, the sauna and the ice bath and the vitamin D and the healthy food. And you go to a farm for 1 hour and you get all of that, right? Like you don't have to go to a sauna and an ice bath. Just go work on a farm out in Texas for 30 minutes and you got your sauna all covered.
Jump in the creek.
And then jump in the creek. And then you get your food from your friend. So it's really just kind of a shifting your mindset of like, how can this, it's more than just going and getting my groceries. It's like, how can I just have a full experience? And, a lot of us are coming to Austin for the community, and we're thinking about that in sort of like this young, fun, creative, like entrepreneur community, but that it starts to expand out to the entire community.
Yeah, I think, it just translates in so many different ways. And, what I'm really hearing is like, once you really start paying attention, once you start asking questions, once you start caring, then you reap the benefits of that. You start connecting with people who are on the same path, whatever their approach. And, I think that's something that farmers and, ranchers and just people that work hard understand, is how things are made, where things come from. I think it's amazing to, think about just what hard work has taught me in my life. Like one of my first jobs where I really started making money was as a ranch hand, or I thought I was going to be a ranch hand, but I spent most of my summer picking up rocks off of this property because he just like would pull a trailer around and he wanted all the rocks gone so that the grass could grow back. And if any of the rocks were too big, we had a backhoe and they'd smash the rocks and then we'd pick up the smaller rocks. And the water was tied to the trailer, so you had to keep up if you wanted water. And those summer days sucked, but I'd leave with just cash in my hand and I would turn into cold beer and gas in my truck. And that's pretty good for a high schooler. But, that summer I really learned like what money was worth, how hard I had to work for that. And it hasn't left me since. And, I hear that the way, you speak about it, Clinton, is it's beautiful to hear that, you moved out, you're moving out on the land, you care about food sources, but then you're also giving back in a way where you're facilitating men's groups, like directly from what you've learned from probably just working hard and caring about life as a father, as, someone who grows things or, cares about where food comes from. And just, I think it's beautiful and amazing that, you're a leader in other ways. And I'd like to hear more about that, of how you've intertwined the two. And because there's multiple ways of serving. Yeah.
Well, will say, I've grown up in the country my whole life. I was raised watching the conventional model at work. I've been in your factory chicken houses where it's 10,000 chickens.
Do they have large talons?
Large talons. Yes, they do. And you could barely walk in there. I've been in those operations. I've been in the feed lots that you hear, and that's all I ever knew for a long time. And so coming where I'm at now, it never really dawned on me until it was personal for me, right? So where it really tied in for me is I lost my wife 7 years ago in a car accident. And that led me down a path where it was, alcohol, aloof in my daughter's life, really lost connection to everything, right? Kind of went off the deep end. And then I started to rebuild. I lost the house, the car, the job, the companies I was building. I was living in my buddy's barn, and I was a ranch hand at a horse stable and making $8 an hour. And honestly, it was that $8 an hour job that was kind of work for the soul. I mean, I've always worked with horses, and there's a very soulful connection there. And so, I got back on my feet. I got an apartment. I got the new car. I was spending more time with my daughter, and I got all the tangible things that I had lost, right? All the stuff, And so I was like, oh yeah, I don't feel anything still. I don't have my life back. So I started to dig deeper into that. It was like, okay, well, why not? And I've always talked about this dream of having, a farm that's self-sustaining, and that's where I live, and I'm like a mountain man, and nobody ever bothers me, right? Because in another life, that's me. I don't talk to any of you ever. You never see me. But then I have a daughter. So how do I spend more time with her? I understood that my happiness stemmed from creating a life that revolved around her. And so it was, okay, well, what does that? And it can't be just money. It can't be something I work from home and spend time with her, because that's not holistic. It doesn't foster my happiness too, because I can't make her happy if I'm not happy. It has to fall into my dream that's a legacy, maybe not for her dream. Maybe she never gets into farming, and that's fine. But through my efforts in farming, I've created a better environment in the community. She will, at the very least, until she's of age to move out on her own, will be raised in. And it's my responsibility as a father and a leader and a member of the community to facilitate that, not only for my daughter, but everyone involved, because she's going to interact with everyone that is involved. So I was doing my morning mobility in my apartment, in my dining room, and it just hit me, and I was like, this is the parallels between farming and fatherhood were just so right in my face. Just every standpoint. And so I said, you know what? That's what I'm doing. I put my notice into the apartment complex that day. I told my boss, I was like, hey, I'm leaving at some point, just letting you know. At my mother's property, I started to work on the soil there. We had always had animals, but I started to really put them to use, use them for what they're worth, and not just that's where we keep our chickens and that's where our goats are and stuff like that. So I started to use them in rotation because I knew I wasn't going to have money. So I had to use nature to improve herself. And it was through discovering what quality of life meant to me that I found farming. And then now for me, it's a responsible thing to, if I can articulate this and make it palatable for another man who may have been in my position, because I know how painful that was. And, I consider myself very lucky to have made it out of that. And if I can thrive through that, then it's my responsibility to give that to somebody else.
Yeah.
and I know you have a background in the military. That was all I was going to do. I was ASVAP ready, perfect PT scores, Marine grunt was all I wanted. And I thought I was going to serve my community through vengeance and violence. And it turns out that I needed to serve my community through love and compassion in the way that I'm now doing it. So yeah, that's just kind of what I'm doing. I'm finding my way. I would say that my experience in agriculture is really only 2 years, because the conventional models that I was in, I wouldn't even consider that agriculture. It was, I think about it now, and I think about the people that I was around in that environment were not happy. They were, I mean, it was terrible.
Just serving a machine at that point, trying to keep up.
It was just them, trying to pay off debts. It was, it's this vicious cycle of like, well, this isn't working, so I need to plant more so it works, and we need to buy this tractor, and now we're in debt, so we have to plant more and then scale up to pay that off, and they're stuck in this loop, and then they pass on a debt to their children. And I was like, I don't want that for my family. That change all starts at home. So that's what I'm just trying to do. I'm trying to help my neighbor. I'm trying to be a good person. And food is the best thing to do that. Good food can be medicine. Bad food can just be food. So that's what I'm trying to do. Just put nutrient-dense food into people so that they can make a difference in their community.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, man. Thank you.
Thank
you for not only learning these lessons, and it sounds like the hard way, man, and but to ask more of yourself, and to first ask enough questions to where you start to get a grip. That's pretty amazing. And then to ask more of yourself, to step up and serve and use your voice. I think that's the most beautiful way that we can, serve our fellow man is to articulate the hardest lessons that we have learned as individuals. Because one, it makes people feel less alone, that they're not the only ones going through hard shit. And then two, just seeing that people made it out on the other side, and, people, look up to you and want your advice, and, they can be that for someone else, as we empower each other. And, that's my biggest takeaway from this conversation today, is that, start caring, start choosing, what you consume, and what you get out of that will empower you. It will, give you a deeper rooted connection back to, what life is, and it's that circle of life. And once we find those avenues that are available to us, then you will find happiness inside your bodies and inside your minds, and that's what translates to others. That's what allows us to bring others up in a world that is love and light. Instead of just working for these systems that have existed for quite some time, we've got to step outside of that and ask more of ourselves always.
Yeah, man.
So, does anybody have anything else they're itching to say? Well, if nobody has anything that's pressing, I'd like to take some questions from the crowd. If anybody has anything that they would like to ask anybody up here, we'll just take the question, and then since we don't have a Q&A mic today, we'll just try to repeat the question back as we answer. Sound good? So, if anybody has any questions. What's up, Sarah?
So, for people that live in the city or in the suburbs, I'm curious, aside from these kind of little indoor light operations where you can grow your basil and whatever, I'm curious what you all think about just the future of people growing their own food on their property, even if they don't necessarily live on a farm, but just kind of the viability of that and making that more widespread in the city and in the suburbs.
It's not possible. No, I mean, like, it can be done with such incremental steps. But yes, so you can grow your own tomatoes. Like, process based on your yield for its caloric expenditure, what it takes to feed you and feed your family. That's why we rely on farmers. And then gardening is something that we're able to have to sustain ourselves. What's more fun is like the utility strip of land that exists between your lawn and the road. I mean, it's just, I forget, I think it's like 30 million acres or something nationwide. Like that would kind of be enough. And then the complaint is, well, then you're growing food that's going to be dealt with the pollution of our cars. And it's like, well, then we should fix that, eh? Like, and it just goes one step by one. So like, they don't even grow food there. Just grow flowers. I mean, the point is just do better than Bermuda grass. But no, I mean, you in your little backyard space, you can have fun, but you cannot feed yourself. It's the simple truth. So for the concept of homesteading and everything, it is going to be reliant on both plant and animal, neighborhoods, communities, and then it starts all to grow out from those steps. So it's a good step to head into, but the completion is only like so much larger. I'm sorry if I was a bummer.
I think it depends on your context, where you're at. I think somewhere like Texas, certain trees can do really well. You can plant certain trees. They can do really well. You can have gardens. I think that concept of community as well would go a really long way, where you might be the person who's really good at growing the fruit trees. Your neighbor might be the person who really wants to have the backyard chickens. The other person might be the one that has a lot of acreage to do the farming and do the produce and stuff. So you might not be able to do it all yourself, which really we can't do anything on ourselves. So that, I think, would go a long way of like, how can we all do this? And secondly, I think it's super helpful regardless if you're going to sustain off of it or not, because you're going to be doing a variety of things. Even if you're planting something and it goes to shit, you're going to learn how hard it is, and you're going to have a lot more respect and appreciation for the people who are doing it. Or you're going to succeed, and it's just going to be, you're going to have like one pear tree and you're going to get 3 pears that first year that you do it, but those 3 pears are going to be the best food that you have all year, because you took the time to nurture it and care for it, and you got it fresh straight from the tree. And that's just going to inspire you to keep doing it more, to keep finding how to do it better, to go find the people who are really doing it. And so I think that process is going to be beneficial no matter what, even if you are starting it under lights or in your counter. Like, I don't think that isn't the end game, because that still isn't building soil if you're doing it under the lights. But it's like, it's this whole, like, we just need to shift our mindset, and the only way to do that is like experiencing it and learning. And so it's like, I didn't start, nobody, like, you just moved to 20 acres. You didn't start on 20 acres. You started in your mom's backyard, like, and look where you are now, right? It's like, none of us, you can't start where you think you're gonna finish. Like, you know this as an entrepreneur, right? I mean, look at this space, right? Like, you started in a van. We just talked about that. I started by just like willy-nilly talking about bone broth somewhere that some guy was just like, come and do whatever you want.
Yep.
So like, I think for a lot of us in Austin, that's what I think is so intriguing about this group of like young entrepreneurs and creatives. It's like, there's just start and keep following that path, and you're just going to learn. And that process of like tripping and falling on your face and having it be that hard work is like really what builds up your resilience, and just inspires you to keep going, and then inspires you to like get people to help you and get more people on board, and it just trickles from there. So it's definitely contextual based. If you're in this area, honestly, he probably is going to have the best answers of like specific things to start growing, but just trying it and getting seed blends from your neighbor or like whatever the case may be. And just learning that process, I think, would be truly helpful.
I would say backyard gardening is a great idea. If nothing else, it'll put you more in tune with your weather. You'll start to pay attention to what's happening around you, seasons. It's very important. Eating seasonally is probably the most difficult thing to do. Even farmers themselves, it's very difficult to eat seasonally. It takes a lot of dedication to do that. And you can wind up, you want to go down the rabbit hole in terms of actual nutrition. If you're eating seasonally, you'll be deficient in something. But it's very good to start there. If you're serious about growing actual food in a small, dense space and metropolitan, then you want to talk to your neighborhood about a community garden. And that's work share. I mean, you can find a space around. Not everywhere is going to have them, but you got places like East Austin, Whisper Valley. These are master planned neighborhoods where they're starting to integrate actual, like from the get, they've got, a fourth of an acre or a quarter of an acre gardens right there. And it's work share, and they're pumping out food. And if nothing else, that's, education. But from a caloric standpoint, you can't feed yourself at home. It's just not in a healthy manner anyway. But
there's also a lot of other reasons to engage with plants and grow plants than just food. If you have flowers growing, you're going to be attracting pollinators. You're going to be sequestering carbon. You're going to be potentially, like you said, even if it's on a road and you have these different plants, they're going to be helping sequester those toxins and put them into the ground. Like, there's a lot of reasons when you start understanding ecosystem processes. It's going to help store water where you are. So I think it goes beyond just the food production. Like anything that isn't just Bermuda grass, anything that isn't just like a lawn that is using up a bunch of water and not producing something, like it's all going to be better, and it's all going to be towards that incremental change.
I have a question for the audience. What's the most irrigated crop in America? Yeah, lawns, grass. That was just a callback.
Yeah, most irrigated. Wow.
Yeah.
So anything is better. Like, you have 4
Anything.
tomato plants, like you're still gonna get tomatoes versus nothing.
Hell yeah.
Anything else? What's up, Taylor?
First of all, I want to say I'm really touched by your guys' story. I resonate deeply with all you guys, and I really appreciate the message you guys are preaching. I feel like I'm trying to preach a similar one.
Thank you.
One of the many hats I wear besides the Eazy Studio doorman is a traveling ranch hand. And I've been on small homesteads, 30-mile ranches with 2,500 head. And really, most of the time I'm working for free because it was something I want to learn. It wasn't something I grew up around. It's been like super life-changing. It's changed the trajectory of my life forever. And I wanted to know if you guys had some sort of volunteer service. Were you educated, or if you knew a resource that did, just to help maybe give that option to people like me that want to learn but don't have the money to like go to school or to start their own, or just to be more involved.
I don't know any farmer that doesn't need help, to be honest.
I go to farmers markets and I get close with farmers that I know are selling good things, and I'll ask them if they have work in exchange for food, because I buy a lot of raw milk and that stuff's $12 a gallon out here. So
Yeah, and also there's not a lot of loose capitals in small farms, so a lot of times that's all they've got to give you. They need help. They don't have money to pay for help, so they get overwhelmed. Their mental health goes down. Their business goes under, and then we trickle down, the current model that we're in. That's also something that I do, is when I say freelance carpentry, that is just all I ever wanted to do was learn with my hands. So just every trade I could possibly learn, and that's growing up and not being able to pay for those things. You fix cars, you fix your own AC, that sort of stuff. So there's really good people out there that need help, And a lot of people, especially around here, they capitalize on that and charge an unreasonable rate to very reasonable people. Like we talk about where you got the bone broth. That's a farm that I believe wholeheartedly in, and she desperately needs help. And I'm an able body to give her a good product with my hands and not have to take money out of her pocket, because taking money out of her pocket hurts her, hurts the movement I believe in, hurts the community that I'm trying to build. And so essentially, not to get too far off on a tangent, exactly what you're saying is going to farmers market is a great source. Asking them if they need help. Maybe it does take creating a relationship first, so they know you're serious. Because a lot of people will just say, well, it's your ulterior motive? What do you want? And then again, I always point back to social media. I've never been an advocate for social media, but I've only ever used it as a tool, and it's been absolutely fantastic. So I think reaching out and being very forthcoming with your intentions, and just leading with your heart in that request is, free labor is awesome. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason I'm on social media is to post videos of goats, and then in the copy on it just be like, who wants to come farm? And I've destroyed people out there. Like, it's on me. I'm sorry. Because, again, you may not even be able to bring veg home. But by all means, typically it was on Saturdays, Jester King. Folks will come out and help me farm, and then we just do beers. And then I'd teach everything I know. And I'd like to see that system replicated. And truthfully, it backs up advocating for the fact that we need to switch to an urban climate, a 4-day work week. And then when you have 4 days to your profession, now 3 days to yourself, one of those days is meant to be reinvested, back into whoever needs it. Because, the only issue is, for volunteering at a farm, typically, unless it's, serious grunt labor, you're coming on greenhorn. So that one day is just then teaching you how to do something. You would have to then come back to even, a couple times to merit even receiving. So even top three, I would say internationally top three market gardeners is Jean-Martin Fortier. He's out of Quebec, and great book. The Market Gardener. Pick it up, then he'll let you know your spacings, what you're supposed to have for your plants and such. And he gets to his chapter on volunteering, and it just says, don't. You get what you pay for, and there's certain seasons for harvesting and stuff where folks can get in, but where they really need the help, it just comes from skilled labor, and it sucks. It really just sucks. It's one of the worst jobs you can have, based on pay. I think even we kind of have this hoorah moment for what were you saying about our service industry workers? God bless them with the little signs in our front yard. But then you tell your kid, the kid's I want to be a farmer. It's you don't want to be a farmer, because we take ourselves away out of the place of servicing. And that's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Is we're servicing one another, and then even to me, servicing the Mother Earth based on the land that we've destroyed. So everyone should just knock on doors for every farm, figure out not just can I volunteer, but when can I volunteer? Load up those seasons, because there's certain parts where they will need that grunt labor, and then during that space, they'll be able to educate you, and that's what you're gonna take away for those first bits. If you aren't proficient at hand tools, then you're not gonna be that much of a use to me. My first instruction is just put that tool away from you, and then I just demonstrate it. This is my circle. This is my circle of death. This is all of your circle of death. Especially if you're getting fatigued or doing beers, that's the range you can kill someone. You just can. So when you bring in urban folk, or just call them poons, and it is like, it's just soft ass, and that's great. Like that's a fine way to be, because on the outside it's very difficult, and we want you to come to put some leather on there, but like there's no way around it. It sucks. And that's what growing like good food looks like. Otherwise, we step into machine-built systems. We further separate the relationship of human with our planet, and that's what gets me bummed, is it all just ends Blade Runner. And we have like 20 some years. I mean, you were bringing up like what is money? Money means nothing. What does water mean? Everything. Like that will be our next war. So to talk about how we're watering our lawns, to talk about how we're watering our crops, like start to look at it as liquid gold, because there's no question that's what the next world war will be fought over. Half of all springs in Texas run dry at this point. California and the Pacific Northwest have now drained their Columbia River Gorge. I have a hard time building relationships and like talking to people, because then I just yell about this and wolves. But it's like, but what is more important to talk about? The fact that we are destroying our natural water sources every single day. Like previously, what did we do about this? We built the guillotine, or no, they built it, but then we took it to then make it work for us. I don't want to encourage violence. It's just there are major steps that have to be moved forward, so we have a comfortable life in like 40 or 50 years. Because like, I don't know, spoiler alert, the next 20-30 are dog shit. Like, it's gonna be real rough time. And I think it's kind of cool though, because like, when's the best time to be on a roller coaster? When it's going down. Because like it's a point of chaos to where like we can make something better for ourselves, better for our children. And like, I do believe that as we're crashing, you were crashing into the ground floor of like that soil or lack thereof, to have to connect.
Yeah.
So I just want to bring it back to your question. So it sounds like you have skills. You've been a traveling ranch hand. You have experience.
Sorry.
What has been your experience when you are asking people at the farmer's market? What have they told you?
The farmers market has been very well received. Before I was going to farmers markets, being out in Indiana, home base, I would contact ranches on mostly through Google. I would find the landscape I wanted to learn about, and Google grass-fed ranches or whatever. Email all 12 of them, get one email back, and that's where I was going. I think both worked well. I just wanted to hear experience and reiterate my success at the farmers market for anybody looking for that.
Cool. Yeah. It sounds like, just reaching out. I mean, that's what I've been doing, honestly. Like and I think it starts kind of with that building the relationship piece is like, yes, a lot of farmers want and need help, but again, it's like that consistency thing. It's like, if you're just going to come for one day, it's more work for them to train you than it is for the help that you're giving them. So it's sort of that consistency thing. It's having the skills, which it sounds like you already do. You probably don't need to be volunteering, to be honest. You probably could find good paying work if you have those skills.
I'll give you money.
So if you, I would love to connect with you more after this, because there are a lot of people that I know that, if you have the skills, like, you could find the work. And secondarily, like, this is a town full of entrepreneurs and business builders. Like, there are businesses to be made in this space. If you can, there's tons of people who just like create events. Like, you just created this out of nothing. You just decided that you wanted to talk about things and you came here and you did it. So if we just decided that we wanted to create a team of people who went and volunteered on farms, we could do it. I have tons of ideas. I've been slowly doing that. I've been slowly building relationships with farmers and ranchers. So
I'd like to help.
yeah, that's awesome. We already have 3 people. There's like 5 other people that I know. I just had a dinner. There was 12 people. So like that's happening. And like, if you have those ideas, like that's how social media can be a tool. It's like we find each other and we build it. Like there's going to have to be, that is what regeneration means. Like there's going to have to be new things that don't exist right now that are going to need to exist for us to have a different future. So if you have those ideas, like it's amazing. And it's amazing that you're already connecting with the farmers. And that's what it's going to take, is like just building that trust and being like, hey, like we're here. You provide us so much. We're going to give to you first. And then you're going to give back to us. And it's about that giving first. And like, that's how I started doing it. Like we mentioned Christy. I mean, the way that I know you is through Christy. Like I'm going to the Weston A. Price conference this weekend because she got tickets for me because I helped her do a delivery. Like there's just so much give and take that like in this consumerism kind of way that we've all grown up, especially in our generation, is hard to know what's out there possible until you start doing it. Like you said, it's like, shit, yeah, I'll work for free raw milk that cost me $12. Like definitely. But it's a different mindset to be open to doing something like that. So it's awesome that you're doing that. That's the first steps. And like, let's definitely talk afterwards, because there's stuff to be built for sure.
Awesome, guys. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today. I know I'll be listening back to this episode when it airs and taking hella notes. But there's a lot of different ways that we can step up and start putting this into practice this week. Talk to Peppy after if you want to come volunteer. And he's stoked to have you. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming out. Every single one of y'all for coming on and taking time out of y'all's lives to join us. See y'all soon.
Thank you, guys.